Welcome to Cult and Classic.
Welcome, friends and fiends of the pod, to another episode of Cult and Classic. As always, I'm your host, comedian, and film reviewer for horrornews.net, Nate Wyckoff. We have got an awesome lineup today of both films and reviewers. With me, as always, is Jeff Tucker. How you doing today, Jeff?
What's up? I fart sometimes.
That's well in line with these films. I'm sure you had a good time. And with us again is Mandy Longley. How are you doing, Mandy?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good. It's always nice to see the change up of faces. And with us again is Greg Johnson. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing good, but I just lost the game, so.
You just lost the game. You know what? It was over before it started. The game. Okay, I'm excited for this. The theme for this week is everybody loves puppets, and I, for one, adore puppets. I am a puppet aficionado, and these are two puppet films, which I think I can pretty much guess that most people who watch movies frequently have not seen and probably have not even heard of these films. And I think that's a damn calumny. We're gonna look at this. First up is 1978's film Magic, starring Anthony Hopkins and Ann-Margret. It's got a crazy good cast. And then next after that is a super special film here. It is 2012's puppet feature, It Came from Uranus. Now, this movie, you may have a very hard time locating this movie. I personally located this movie at a Goodwill in New England many years ago. It came out in 2012, so it can't be that many years ago, but a long time ago. It aired at some festivals. It is a Canadian work, but we're going to talk about it because I think this needs to reach the nation. But first, Magic. Now, I'm going to unload this plot on you real quick. It's not particularly difficult, I think. A magician card performer finds that he can use a puppet, a ventriloquist dummy, to build his confidence and use the dummy to connect with people because he does not have much charisma. He becomes really big. He's going to get a TV deal. And then all of a sudden he backs out because they want to do a mental health check and he doesn't want to take it. Why? Because he knows that he is too attached to the puppet and he really can't function without his puppet named Fats. His name is Corky. The puppet's name is Fats. No one in this movie has a normal name. And he runs away from the city, goes to his high school crush's family rental property on a lake somewhere in rural New York. And from there, I think he's in New York. From there, it kind of goes into a crazy murder, the puppet's controlling my life spiral. So I feel like we've seen this kind of story before many times with ventriloquist dummies. They're freaky. This one in particular, I thought was really great. But what makes this movie especially awesome is the fact that it is directed by well-known actor Richard Attenborough, who died in 2014. But I think most of us will recognize and remember him as as Hammond, the funder of Jurassic Park in Jurassic Park. The writer is William Goldman, a novelist and a screenwriter who wrote a book that this is based on as well as a script. And most people will know his work from the Once and Future King novel, aka The Princess Bride. So this is a huge departure from The Princess Bride in tone and material, but I think it's equally well wrought. I'm going to jump right into this. Mandy, what were your expectations going into this movie?
Well, there is another movie that I was a fan of when I was like a teenager that starred Anthony Hopkins as a younger person. So I was like, oh, I'm used to what Anthony Hopkins is like as a younger person. And then my expectations were just blown. I was like, I don't know what's going on. He looks like a 12-year-old boy. Like,
so young. I know.
So
young. In
so
this
strange. I was expecting more magic.
Yeah.
Right? The show is called Magic. I was expecting more magic. I was expecting more
That's true.
misdirection, mystery, and I was sorely disappointed because it's all just right in your face, like straight ahead the whole time.
Because I mean, he does.
Like
Yeah, he does sleight of hand, but it's really, the whole movie is not about magic at all. It's not about magic, the tricks or the illusions. It's not even really about ventriloquism, right? Like he actually, I mean, Fats the Dummy plays a critical role, but he's really more of a background presence a lot of the time. Mr. Greg, what was your expectation going in?
I thought it'd be a lot scarier. I found myself wondering where the music was most of the movie. It was just a lot of dead silence, and then it was like, oh right, here's the tense scene. Let's throw some atmosphere music in, and like, oh, we just had 30 minutes of none of that, so why now?
And I think part of the issue too is the poster. There's several posters, as there are for most films of this film, but the poster is pretty terrifying. I think it's got most of them feature just the dummy, which is a really, I mean, it looks like a cartoon version of Anthony Hopkins' character in this film, but like it's just from his upper lip to the top of his head, the dummy, and underneath it says "Magic, a terrifying love story." And then one of the posters, which is my favorite, has this ridiculous like F-level rhyme on top. Abracadabra, I sit on his knee. Presto changeo, and now he is me. Hocus pocus, we take her to bed. Magic is fun, we're dead. That is by far, I've written some bad poetry in my time, but that is one of the worst pieces of poetry. And also, I'm gonna say it really is not what the movie is. Like there are a couple of lines in there, okay, but it's not it. We'll get into that as well, but that sort of kicks my ass, that poem. Jeff, what was your expectation going into this film?
Well, I think Mandy kind of hit the nail on the head there. It's very straightforward. Like basically from the first scene, I feel like you basically know how the movie's going to go.
Yes.
I think the only reason this works is because it has like really great performances.
Fantastic performances.
Yeah. Anthony Hopkins. You have Mickey, from
Burgess Meredith from Rocky, plays his agent.
Yeah. And he's a fantastic. I
wish so good.
He was in more stuff. He was really good in this.
I just sort of throw this in here. So in Rocky, Burgess Meredith plays, Rocky, you gotta hit him, like that guy, right? Like everybody knows him from that role. He is at the top. I think he's at the top of his game in this movie as the agent. But this is the funniest thing, because in Rocky 3, I think it's Rocky 3, where Rocky fights Mr. T, Mickey dies. And like you find out he's Jewish, which is hilarious because that's never been even remotely broached or even a thing in Rocky. Yet when I watch this, he is very clearly supposed to be Jewish, and he's an agent. It's a stereotype, but also his character just he plays it that way. And I thought that was funny that he's Jewish in this film, and he's also Jewish in Rocky, but only when he's dead. I thought that was a strange little parallel. Let's kind of, I think expectations is a big thing to look at with this movie, because it looks like it's really supposed to be a high tension horror film, probably with a supernatural bent, but really it's a psychological drama. And I think that probably, because Anthony Hopkins doesn't talk much about this movie, it's not poorly reviewed in general. I'm not sure exactly when it came out what it was, but I mean, William Goldman got an Edgar Award, which is a mystery. It's one of the highest honors for mystery writers. He got the Edgar Award for Best Motion Picture Screenplay in 1979 for this film. So I think that it was recognized that it's a well-made film. I think back to when we reviewed Cruising, and it's a similar thing, right? It's kind of a forgotten film or an intentionally pushed aside film, but it has a huge pedigree behind it, and it's very well made. Let's listen to this clip to kind of get the vibe of this film. Now, this is early in the beginning when Burgess Meredith's character has an exec from, I think, NBC come to see Corky perform in the club.
A nice gimmick, the dummy. What's his name?
All have a great evening.
Fats.
Don't encourage him.
I will now change a diamond into a heart.
I guess the reason I'm such a great lover is,
I want to hear about your sex life if you don't mind.
Tell us all about yours then. Everybody likes short stories.
really a clever shtick.
All right. Pick a diamond.
Huh?
I said pick a diamond.
All right.
It'll change into a heart while I'm holding it. Oh, go on, show the audience.
If you're so great, change it while I'm holding it.
You won't give it back to me? Well, that's another trick you ruined. Let's see. I just have to think of something else.
You mean you're not going to change my diamond?
Hmm?
Jesus Christ.
What?
It turned into a heart while I was holding it.
So it's interesting whenever you have a comedian or some sort of comedic act that's in a film, you have this weird thing where there's two ways to go about it. And one is way harder than the other. Either you, as a writer, actually craft really good stand-up or otherwise material, right? And have them laugh, which is incredible. Any comedian will tell you it's very difficult and it takes a lot of time and trial and error. Or you do things that are mildly clever that clue the audience into, oh, people are supposed to like this. And I kind of got that vibe from this. I think it's on the higher level. Like, it's a funny joke, right? Like, why don't you talk about your love life? People love short stories. Like, okay, but it's old, and it always intrigues me. And maybe it's because I'm a comedian that we sort of just accept these shorthand notes that, oh, this is funny. This guy, like, in the real world, even in 1978, no NBC exec would be amazed by this show, right? Like, I just don't think they'd go and they'd be like, fantastic, that a dick joke, that's fantastic. Like, it's not gonna fly. I don't know if anybody else noticed that as they're watching it. They're like, they're telling me this, and so I'm accepting it, but right away it's a setup that I'm like, this can't hinge on this, and luckily it really doesn't. That's just a setup.
I mean,
yeah. I mean, I think that's a common mechanic, like what you just described is, let's tell the audience this person is ugly, even though they're clearly beautiful, and we're supposed to then like follow along. And that's like a common thing. I was kind of like, I kind of agree. It's like right on the edge here. I thought that his little ventriloquist act that kind of ran through the whole film was entertaining.
Yeah.
And partially because I think the voice acting was very good by Hopkins.
Hopkins does the voice of both himself and Fats.
Yeah, and it's actually like it sounds just a little teeny bit like Hopkins. So there's like there's like a little bit of him in there, but it really does a good job of like throwing his voice, and creating like a whole nother character.
Well, and the movements of the puppet are truly my favorite thing about this film, right? Like, Fats is
very good,
is a fantastic puppet. Like his eyebrows, his facial expression, the way he's carved, his disturbingly human teeth, right? Like, everything about him is both. It's not like if you saw him, I don't think anybody would jump off the bus and run down the street. You know what I mean? Like, he's not terrifying in that way, but he's too human and too inhuman to be comfortable.
What I found very disturbing or added to the disquiet of looking at him is that he very much looks like Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah.
That he was modeled to look like the actor. So they're almost like twins, but they're very obviously like two different sides of that coin. And like seeing something so similar, like you get into that creepy valley a little bit more than I think even with like a normal ventriloquist dummy.
And I'd love to see the mechanics behind it, because I don't know that he's really, if you watch a contemporary ventriloquist, there's a bunch of them, but there's only a few that are famous. If you look at Jeff Dunham, like, yes, his dummy's eyes move and things like that, but they're very limited in their movements, whereas they definitely make an effort to make Fats very expressive. His eyes go in full 360s, up, down, around angles, and he felt like a character to me.
I mean, I think that they can do that because it's a movie, right? It's like the same thing, like Anthony Hopkins not doing ventriloquism. He's doing a recording later. But they probably had a full-on puppeteer, with like many. That's
my assumption, yeah.
Many like levers and stuff, like something you couldn't do with a single hand on a stage, for example. And so you know, even though it wasn't real ventriloquism, and it wasn't really a like actual like, you know, he was using the puppet, it still worked for me. You know, it's still like, it was like, oh yeah, this is a really good puppet.
I think it worked better.
Really good ventriloquist
because it was a little bit better than real life, you know.
Yeah.
Greg, I jumped over you there. You look like you were going to say something.
You're good. I think I bought it for the pitch meeting of like, oh, like, let's put this guy on Johnny Carson. Won't that be great? Like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like a one-off on Carson, no one cares. But I think it broke me when his love interest was really into this.
Oh, right.
And like, he's like flirting with her via the doll, and like, oh, like, hey, Toots, like, why don't you take your top off, or like whatever he's saying to her. And I'm like, okay, I get it. Anthony Hopkins, like, fine, like, good-looking guy, but like this puppet master, like, no.
And this is Ann-Margret. Like, this is the sex symbol of decades, right? Like all through the 60s into the 70s and 80s. Like this, she's a sex symbol, and she doesn't just like fats. She like loses her shit over fats.
Yeah.
Like when he brings when Anthony Hopkins, because they first meet and he's like, I need a room, and they pretend like they don't know each other. And back in his room, he's like, she didn't recognize me, fats. And back in her room, she's like, he didn't even recognize me. And then like he's like, ah, screw it. And he brings him in to the house, and she's like, you do recommend it. It's this kind of funny moment. But then like he does some shtick with fats, and she like rushes and hugs him, and she has to touch the puppet all over. And like it's like in the Robert Redford Great Gatsby, the shirt scene, when they're like pulling the shirts off the shelves and throwing it, and it becomes like, it's like this parallel to an orgasmic experience without them having sex with the puppet, and it's super intense and over the top, like she's manic about it. That it was an interesting scene. And I think,
well, so my take on that is a little different. So to me, that was them creating reinforcement for him being attached to this puppet.
Sure.
Right? It was essentially like, oh, me not enough, but with the puppet, I'm enough. You know what I mean? It's just like that. Yeah. And it's like immediately reinforced by, oh, like now she's excited to like see me or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good bit of foreshadowing. I mean, from that angle.
Yeah.
I mean, we know right away, as soon as like we see his performance and he meets with Burgess Meredith, which is about 15 minutes into the movie, that Fats is his confidence, right? It is his charm, because the movie actually opens with him talking to an older man who is his mentor in this, you know, rundown apartment. In fact, if anybody's seen The Joker, this is very much in the same vein, although it goes a little bit off the rails at the end. It's like, it's a rundown performer. So, I mean, he's at least good at what he does. I don't think anybody says that that the Joker character is good at stand-up, but he's failing, and he's lying to his mentor at the beginning. He's like, yeah, it went great. My first show went fantastic. I did all the tricks right and everything. And he's like, tell me the truth. And he's like, well, I did do all the tricks right, but they couldn't give a shit. Which, by the way, as a comedian, that was triggering, because that is 100% accurate. You're up on stage. It doesn't matter if you get 100 right. If there are 7 people in the audience, 2 of them are making out, one of them is watching you as though she's your mom, but she's not your mom, and you're a little concerned. Like, you're like, please don't do this pity. I'd rather no one look at me at this point. And then there's like 4 other people having a good time and laughing loudly at your not punchlines because they're not listening to you. That's exactly what it's like being a stand-up comedian 99.9% of the time. And he's doing card tricks, which, as impressive as they may be, card tricks on stage is an insane concept. That right away, I'm like, of course it's going to fail. You're on stage. What is the shtick, right? And then,
well, even when he going back, when he does it in front of the producers, like,
yeah,
like here's my card, and like they showed all the way from the back of the room, and I'm like,
what
could be that card.
Right. It's like, actually the entire deck of cards is just, you know, penises and asterisks. Like, it doesn't matter. But so we see that in the beginning, and then it turns out it didn't go well, because then he flipped out on the audience, right? He's like, you idiots, like, blah, blah, blah. Well, then it just does this time jump where his mentor's gone and he's actually successful. And you see him start to like do his card tricks, and it's failing. It's not going well, but it's a packed house. And then he gets heckled from the back, and then he walks back, and that's Fats that's heckling him. And that was a cool moment, right? Because you're seeing this whole, like, it instantly told us that, oh, Fats is the successful part of him, and it's going to be a barrier to him being successful himself. You know, it helped him get there, but he can't get past it. That's going to be the roadblock.
You know, I almost wish the cover of the movie was just Anthony Hopkins, because I really wish I didn't know going in that this was going to be a ventriloquist sketch.
Right.
Because that reveal was really good.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's this heckler, he's obviously successful now. Who is this heckler? And then to realize it's him, and it's him planting himself.
Which would be great. And I like Burgess Meredith's character. He's like, the reason that magic, because the NBC's guy is like, magic doesn't work. No one wants to see that on TV. He's like, no one wants to see it because the camera can't hide anything. Whereas someone who's using sleight of hand, you're paying attention to something else. It's a misdirect, just like a joke, right? And he's like, the great thing is that Fats takes all the attention, the puppet, so he's always the misdirect. And it always works, even on camera. It's actually a cool theory. I actually liked that idea. They were wise not to try and show that in a way, because it obviously, I don't really think in 1978, I don't care how good your card tricks are. If you're not physically in person and it's more of a one-on-one exchange, no one's going to want to see that. This is not going to happen. I also don't buy that NBC is booking an R-rated comedian for anything at that time. Like, I mean, it just doesn't. I mean, I don't think it happens. I mean, maybe
you don't think Carson likes sex jokes?
I don't. And he may have liked them, but he didn't put them on TV. And I think that's sort of I don't get it. I guess that was my bridge too far. But again, it was
like
just
your R-rated stuff. Now do a clean set.
Exactly. It would have been it would have been Pee Wee Herman. Like, oh, you did an R-rated stage show about a kid show. Here's a kid show, you know, like, here's a kid show, and we're going to pretend to be surprised when you get arrested masturbating in a porn theater. Like, that's sort of the setup. But to get back to Ann-Margret does a really good job in this. I will say right now, I don't know if anyone else agreed, her makeup artist was hateful for this film. My wife and I were both like, I guess those are eyebrows. Like, I don't, you know, like a Bic pen in 5 minutes can do eyebrows, but it's probably not, shouldn't do eyebrows. And this is me being a fan of hers since Kitten with a Whip, you know, like, she's a sex symbol. She's still very pretty, and she does a very good job of playing the, like, super thirsty divorcee, even though she's not divorced, who also is like a real person. But she's they also, I will say, was sort of masterful in that they made it believable that she wants him really bad, but does she even really want him especially? Like, because we don't actually see them connect that well, in my opinion. It's like he wants her because he was obsessed with her, and she, I guess, wants him because he wants her, right?
She wants him because after he belligerently berates her, he can, I guess her card.
Right. Let's listen to this scene. I pulled this scene, and now I will say this. It's an intense scene, and that shows the power of the acting in this movie to create the strongest tension I've had in a movie in a long time over a fucking card trick. Here we go.
We came close. What the hell?
Sit down, Peg! Get back down! That was your fault. You started out fine, but then you let me drift.
Jesus, Cor, forget it.
I was in bad shape in New York, Peg, and I had to run. Where'd you go when there's no place to go? Go home. Except there was nothing but empty houses and old cemeteries. And I figured I'd stop by here and ask you folks about you. Where were you living? What city? How many kids? Never expected to find you. I've loved you all my goddamn life. I needed a piece of good news about Peggy Ann Snow. Shuffle the goddamn cards fast! Gonna do it right this time. Just knowing you, because we both wanted to know. Give me a deck. Take my deck. Spread the cards. Take your card. Pick it out. Look at it. Put it back on top. deck once. Take my deck. Look for your card. When you find it, tell me. Look at me.
Should I think now?
Yes, very hard.
I am.
You're not. I can tell by your eyes you're not.
Well, I'm frightened is why.
Nothing to be afraid of.
If it goes bad.
It won't go bad, not if two people want something as much as this. There must be nothing in your mind but your card.
It's a long clip, but that's my favorite scene in the movie, probably. And the reason is because one, we see his real character, right, coming out to a point, but also it's a really uncomfortably realistic moment of that sort of overbearing personality where he's like, sit down, and he gets really intense, and yeah, you can see she's visibly frightened, and then he's like, why are you frightened? Everything's fine, just do the thing. And you're like, no, that isn't what you were acting like it isn't okay, you were terrifying, and now you're downplaying that and telling me it's fine. And it's that weird that weird thing that a lot of times like people in abusive relationships go through, right? And we see that she is probably in some sort of abusive relationship, so it's not shocking that she's cycling into this one potentially, right? And we also, I think it's a good foreshadow of sort of how Fats operates with Corky, right? Because Fats sort of, he teases him basically, right, all the time. He doesn't ever he doesn't make him in like, do this or I'll kill you. Like, that's not him. It's more insidious. He's like, oh yeah, she'll love the, putz who plays with a doll. Like, it's that sort of like, he belittles Corky into reinforcing that feeling that he probably has, which is, I am worthless, and without Fats, I'm nothing. And then he gets him to go along with it. And what does he get him to go along with? Essentially end up killing two people in order to try and get the girl and really get Fats and Corky to be alone by themselves, right? Like, that's the ultimate goal, is Fats wants to keep everyone away from the truth of the relationship with him and Corky. I don't know what anybody thought about that dynamic, because Corky ostensibly wants to be with his childhood's, a love interest, but Fats says no. Fats wants him and Corky to be the only pair in the group. And I don't know what was the thought process on that for you guys as you were seeing it.
I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
No, you first.
So I was disappointed that we didn't see more of the development of Fats and where he came from out of Corky. So was it that Corky had this explosive rage or like this alternate side of his personality, which was not socially acceptable and was somehow repressed at some point in his adolescence? Seemed like he was shy in the high school flashbacks, but like, who knows what was really going on there. And then we see him with his mentor saying, like, his mentor's like, oh, well, you should have charmed them. Like, you need to be more charismatic. And Corky literally says, like, I can't use my charm. I can't be charming. And I wanted to know, like, well, why can't, like, what's going on with him that he has to repress, like, basically all of his character in public. And we don't see any of that, and like why it kind of comes out through Fats. And you could kind of see it's like, yeah, I don't know, like he's battling with himself. Like, does he lose like his like personality side of himself to like be with another person, like to be with this woman? Or has Fats really kind of like taken over as like the more dominant part of his personality, like through that year that they worked together on the show, or like working to develop the show? And then it's just kind of like he can't give it up. So that was sort of what I saw. I just would have liked to see like more of that year that we lost of him like developing his show and developing the character of Fats.
It is sort of an interesting time jump, because it's like a very hard turn where it's like it almost could have just started at his show at his show when the NBC exec shows up. Like we get this, and you find this often in novels turned into films, especially when the novelist is the screenwriter. There's certain things they have. It's like the kill your darlings moment, right? They have a hard time cutting certain things that they see as very important, even if the importance is sort of downplayed in the new medium of film. But in the book, apparently, Corky's character is an alcoholic. And I don't know how much that plays in, but we often see alcoholism used as sort of a signifier that someone has demons that lash out at different times. So that would be interesting to know. But Greg, you were going to say something about that relationship.
Oh, I mean, I was going to bring up the her husband. I guess I really wanted to see him as more of just a piece of shit, because we see Anthony Hopkins' character as, I mean, you know, psychotic by the end. But you're like, okay, like he's intense, and maybe she likes that because whatever reason, I'm willing to go along with it for now. But then when we get to her husband later on, it seems his greatest sin is, I don't know, he's boring. Like he didn't, you know, I guess I would have liked to have seen the husband at the end, really fly off the handle and, like, I don't know, choke his wife out or something crazy, so that you can kind of rewind and be like, okay, like, yeah, Hopkins was like, came on intense, but the character wasn't, I guess, malicious. I don't know.
Like just an evil person.
Yeah.
And actually, sorry.
No. Yeah. That was just it. That Hopkins didn't come off. He came off so wild that you expected the husband to be a monster.
Right. And sort of, it's more like, because Ann-Margret's character, who, by the way, has another ridiculous name in this movie, Peggy Ann Snow.
Yeah.
Okay. And her husband's name is Duke, who was played by Ed Lauter. Ed Lauter, if you look him up, look at his face, you will recognize him. Very prolific. He's been in everything from The Rocketeer to he was in the X-Files a couple times. Seabiscuit. He's been in everything, really. He has. He actually passed away in 2013, but he still has a movie that hasn't come out yet for post-production. So he's been everywhere. He plays the husband who does have a moment of rage when he comes home and realizes that his wife has been visiting with the guy that he knew had the hots for her all those years ago. And he throws her on the bed and tries to get her to admit that she had an affair with him. And she claims she doesn't, but she wanted to, which was a good scene. It was sort of it reminded me of, and of course she did have an affair with Corky, right? But she says, I didn't, but I wanted to. And it reminds me of sort of that surprise scene that causes a lot of emotional turmoil, as in the film adaptation of Cabaret, with Liza with a Z, when she's like, I slept with him, and her lover looks at her and laughs and goes, so did I. And you're just like, it's that whoa moment where you expected her to lie and that would be the end of it, and then maybe something would happen with him and Corky, but instead there's that extra tag that sort of reveals the literary nature of the script, right? It's an extra bit that a lesser film wouldn't have. I don't know that this film ever reaches the heights that it aims for, but I think that those moments do add something. We also, as you said, he doesn't seem like, you kind of feel bad for her husband, right? Because he like forcibly encourages, quote unquote, Corky to get on a boat with him. He's like, come on, we're going to go fishing. And he knows something's up, right? Because he's like, where's Peggy? And he's like, she went into town, said she had a decision to make. You're like, okay, like, that's not, we know exactly what's up. Like, are you going to kill me and throw me in the river where I already killed my agent and threw him? And they get in the boat, and you literally have the scene where Duke is like, she said you didn't sleep with her. And he's like, we didn't. And then he, instead of escalating things, he actually just sort of like seems to accept it, and then just breaks down and says, I don't know what to do. I always failed her, and this is failing now, and I just don't know what to do. And you're like, oh shit. Like, it would have been so much easier, and that's why there's tension there, right? If he'd been an asshole and then Corky could just kill him and you would move on with the next scene, but it doesn't work that way. And although he does end up, trying to kill him or killing him at some point, it's a messy, frustrating thing. And also, they do this interesting thing where the two people that are killed in this film, spoiler alert, I don't know why you're listening to our podcast if you're not willing to endure spoilers before you watch the movie, but is Hopkins sort of gets away in the first murder by not being the one who killed his agent, right? Or tried to kill his agent, because he's literally beating him to death with Fats the puppet, right? Which is a super uncomfortable scene because it's the first time we've seen violence in the film, and they don't shy away from showing a sort of realistic bludgeoning of an old man. And it's an old man that we like. Burgess Meredith had got to be the best agent in the world, because he's like, I'm going to get you help. We're going to bite this thing. Like, we're going to take care of it. Okay. And you want him to succeed. But you know that it's going to go horribly wrong. And it does. But Fats is the one that technically, he thinks kills him. Right. And then we get the scene where Duke is killed, and it's Fats holding the knife. Even though it's Anthony Hopkins' hand, it's supposed to be Fats. He's behind him, behind a curtain. So we got this curtain thing going on. So Anthony Hopkins sort of has this thing, his character, where I'm not the one that did these things. And then at the end, Fats is encouraging him to go upstairs and get Peggy to open the door so he can kill her and they can leave and move on. And he can't do it. And I thought it was an interesting play where it felt like what they were trying to do is say, when Fats is there, Fats can do these things, but Corky on his own can't do these things. So it's that the same dynamic we've seen, but turned from a positive or from a negative into a positive, right? Corky's incapable of succeeding on stage without Fats, but in actual life, Fats is going to ruin things, and only Corky can do the right thing. And that right thing turns out to be, instead of stabbing Peggy, he stabs himself, and he goes back to the cabin, and there's that little reveal. I don't think it was particularly shocking at that point, but he's dying. And I loved that this ventriloquist movie, normally, like, you think of the Goosebumps ventriloquist dummy, right? He's evil. All they want to do is get rid of him, and he's just a monster. And that often is the case with the split personality stories like these, right? The other personality is the bad one. In this, it was a much more, probably, I mean, to call any of this psychologically accurate is questionable, but it was a more accurate thing, right? Because Fats isn't like, you dirty, rotten piece of shit, I can't believe you killed me, as he's dying on the floor. He's like, I don't want to go alone. Come over here with me. And it's this, you get this insight that, like what you were, Mandy, talking about, that you don't get between them. You get the insight into they need each other. Like, and it made me think more about it. It's like, okay, Fats wants Corky to himself, also for self-preservation, right? Because if Corky goes, then the need for Fats goes. And so they both end up still clinging to each other in the end. It's like the separation anxiety is what causes the tension in the movie and the plot to happen. And then ultimately it's resolved by returning to that status quo. They don't overcome that. Even though it seems like there's a resolution, the resolution is actually return to status quo. And I thought that was an interesting thing for a film to do. And I think it sort of, I actually liked it. But I feel like that's probably part of the reason why the film isn't heavily remembered, is because there's no explosive outcome and resolution that changes things. Instead, it's a resolution that actually returns it to what we saw in the very beginning of the movie, which is a recession from everyone else.
I mean, I couldn't see another way for the film to end. Like, I thought that ending was perfect. Like you said, it was very realistic. It was very kind of surprising. It didn't have, the puppet kind of cackling at him or whatever. But on the other hand, it's yet another movie where someone has a mental illness and the solution is kill yourself.
I know.
Like, just, you
that
tried.
was very frustrating.
Well,
that was very frustrating.
Yes and no. I mean, the answer really was, like, let his agent get him
help him. Right.
Yes.
That was the real answer. He came up with the wrong answer.
Multiple times.
Multiple times.
Yes. But, yeah, I mean, it is realistic because a lot of people do end up taking that route, right?
Well, yeah. And so let's listen to this scene where, because I liked that the plot points, while nothing, even the murders were never like, I felt very high energy. There was a lot of tension in the movie, but I think the biggest amount of tension came in the non-action moments. And one of them was in this scene when basically it's when Corky's had a really good time with Peggy and her husband's not back yet, and he returns to his the little rental house, and Fats is giving him the business there. Like, what are you going to do? Like, you going to leave? You going to stay with whatever? And he's arguing with him, and he's literally screaming at the puppet, and the puppet is screaming back. And he turns, and Burgess Meredith, the agent, is in the doorway watching him, just like, and he's not shocked. He's just deflated. Like, he looks and he's like, I instantly know what's going on and why you don't want to take the psych eval, and we have to handle this. And he becomes a very strong father figure there, which we haven't seen really come into play, because we don't know that first character we see, his mentor, that's not his father. We know that because of the flashback when he goes to his house. But we also don't know that he's had a father, because he sort of has this puppet, right, who's directing him now. So it's sort of like the puppet again is threatened by this agent. So let's listen to this scene when he shows up and he's trying to convince Corky to go see doctors.
Girls are for down the line, kid. Right now, you gotta let me help you. I know a lot of people, beautiful doctors.
He means head shrinkers. He just thinks you're a fruitcake.
He doesn't. He never said that. He's on our side.
He's the villain. Don't forget that. Never forget that.
Hey, kid. I'm going to ask you to do something. It's a little something anybody ought to be able to do. Now, if you can do it, fine. We'll forget this whole thing. But if you can't, we'll think about getting you to see somebody fast. Is it a deal?
Name it.
Make Fat shut up for 5 minutes.
That to me was like one of the best scenes, because he's asking, I mean, he knows that there's no way Corky's character can do this. He's just seen the actual dynamic between these two. And it is so masterfully played by Burgess Meredith. Like, I loved him in Rocky, and he's been in so many things, you know, Archie's Place, he was also prolific. But this scene, he doesn't play a caricature in this movie. He's a stereotype that turns out to be a real person. And those are sometimes some of the best moments, because we see something as an audience and we fill in all the blanks and we move on. And then when they introduce something new, it doesn't shatter that, but it turns that template that we have into a real person from that 2D picture that we already auto-filled. And that's what he does in the scene. And you just know it's going to end badly. And it gets worse and worse, sort of like the way Duke, the husband, when he's not a terrible person, or at least a monster, we start to feel bad the fact that he's falling into some dangerous shit. We see in every word out of the agent's mouth just becomes more and more caring. And you're just like, no, it's going to get so bad. And it does. It gets terrible. And not only does, I mean, the brutality in the film is not over the top, but it is uncomfortable, right? It's disturbingly realistic. I mean, he doesn't just hit him with a puppet a bunch and he's dead. He thinks he's dead. He tries to drag him out and drown him in the middle of the ocean. And then it turns out he's actually still alive. And then he has to drown him. And then you find out after, he very much likely was probably still conscious enough to drag himself to the shore before dying. You're just like, good God, it's so terrible.
Going back to the hey, can you get Fats to shut up for 5 minutes? I thought that was such an interesting choice. Thinking about the 31 questions to make anyone fall in love with you, and it's like a series of questions back and forth, and the last one is stare into each other's eyes for 5 minutes and say nothing. And if you've never done that, 5 minutes is a long time. And I think that's kind of funny, that parallel of he can't do it. And, not that he's going to fall in love with his agent, but that him and his agent aren't fundamentally compatible.
Right. Yeah. That's a brilliant comparison. And it was painful because they don't just sit there for a few seconds and he's like, I can't do it. He's like, are we going to sit in silence? how long has it been? And he's like, 48 seconds. And he's like, and then he just waits, and then he does another thing, and he's like, a minute. And then I loved that moment. I mean, Anthony Hopkins, this film reminded me why he's a master. Because frankly, I haven't given a shit about a lot of the work he's done in the contemporary films. And I don't think he does either. It's like he was asked in an interview, I think a few years ago, oh, did you watch the new Transformers film you're in? And he goes, no, I haven't watched any of them. I don't watch Transformers. And it's like, I mean, and I have nothing against all the Transformers films. In fact, I'm wearing a Transformers shirt right now, unintentional. But they're not great movies from a storytelling standpoint. There's many benefits of certain films. That is not one of them. It's a spectacle movie. There you go. There is no reason for Anthony Hopkins' character or Anthony Hopkins, the actor, to be in those films. But this movie benefited radically from Anthony Hopkins because his delivery is intentional. It's very strong. And it just comes out in these scenes, like during the 5-minute silence. It doesn't just say, screw this is stupid. He looks at Burgess Meredith and he says, I can't do it. Like it's an acknowledgement, this honest, brutal, painful acknowledgement. And it was like, it's like a moment that we would see in a film about a therapist having a breakthrough with a serial killer or someone whose father was abusive. You know what I mean? Like it's this really tearful, heart-wrenching moment. And I love what you said, Greg, about the compatibility. It is sort of like, because it is really kind of a love triangle, right? Like in these films, like we have, and most ventriloquist movies come to this, right? Which is there is a triangle that can't sustain itself because there's the puppet and the ventriloquist and the ventriloquist and the other woman. And that's what happens there. I think I personally really enjoyed this movie, but it does have, I wonder, Greg, when you said there's no music or there's very little music for most of it, I wonder if it's because the film itself feels so understated. It wants you to sit with tension, but I feel like it didn't want you to get too attached to anyone. Am I the only one that felt that way? Like I was most attached probably to the agent because of his kindness, but everyone else, I'm definitely an observer. I'm not living in this film.
Or that, like, no one had a theme song. They didn't try and tell you, here's the tense moment.
Right. It's true.
Like, no one was very likable.
Yeah. Everyone was damaged, right? Like, and it sort of goes back to that idea where it's like Peggy Ann Snow, she doesn't want, it doesn't seem necessarily like she really wants Corky particularly. She wants someone who adores her again and treats her like the high school beauty that she was. And for people who are, yeah.
And speaking of the high school thing, did anyone else notice she said something like they graduated 15 years before, but everyone looked like 40 years old? Was that like a really weird moment for everybody else?
For sure. No, it was. And also she looked older than him to me. And that could be a socialized thing, but she did. And I think she was born in 41 and Hopkins was born in 37. So clearly it's not the case. But I want to say it was sort of maybe the styling because he also dressed kind of like a boy. He had like Argyle sweaters and like kind of doofy polo shirts. And she dressed like someone who's frankly lives on a farm and has sort of given up. She dressed very dowdy for most of it. And also, if anyone's interested in this, Ann-Margret is topless for one scene. It's not a big scene, but I feel like cult films, we always get to that moment where Ann-Margret did a topless scene when she was, in almost 40. And again, she wasn't even that old, right, when this came out. She was like 37. I'm 36, for God's sakes. But I do feel like it was a little surprising because how many actresses do we know right now, especially really successful actresses, who when they're almost 40 years old are doing a topless scene? I think that when you get a film like this that's pretty highbrow, people do things for the script because it's a realistic, natural moment. She doesn't step out of the shower and trip and her towel falls off. It's not, this isn't an anime moment, right? It's just they're both in bed. Also, Anthony Hopkins' butt, so enjoy.
But we didn't see Fats naked, so what's the point?
We did see him without hair.
That's true.
and I thought that was interesting. And I also thought that he has a bandage under his head when he's used to bludgeon the agent. And I thought that that was a fascinating thing because he has the head wound and he has to cover it up with a cap. And then a weird moment right after that, when the husband Duke takes Corky out on the boat, Duke is wearing like the identical but man-sized cap that Fats wears to cover the bandage, this little like woven blue cap. And it was just too weird. In a film with this large a budget and stuff, there's no way the costumer did not see that, or the prop master or somebody did not understand that, which made me try and find parallels. And I don't know that I did, except that it's like at that moment, both the husband and Fats are the two equal barriers to Corky being with Peggy, right? Like Fats doesn't want it to happen, Duke doesn't want it to happen, and both of them are now wearing this similar outfit. I thought that was interesting. It wasn't explored. But can we just talk about how fucking cool and terrifying Fats sitting at the window looking out at all of the scenes that involve murder or potential murder? Like that's crazy, because that means that Corky had to literally take the puppet, put him by the window, angle him so he's looking out the window to watch him drag his agent's dead body to the middle of the river. Like those moments were just, I loved them. And he does the same thing. He's looking out the window at the boat when, you know, Duke and Corky go on the boat, and it's just and he goes in, said, I'm gonna get my jacket. But we also know that probably he went in to put Fats at the window, because Fats wasn't at the window before. So it's this really crazy little things in this film that are worth thinking about. And so we're going over time a little bit on this. Yeah. So we're going to wrap this up. And I'll leave our listeners on this film with the question that we always ask. Who would you recommend this film to and why? Mandy, let's start with you.
Oh, you started with me before, and I'm still not prepared. You would think that I would know by now.
Trying to give you a redemption moment. It's not happening.
Right? And I totally failed. I don't know. I guess if you want to see what Anthony Hopkins looked like as a younger man, he looks very much younger in this. See him really practicing his craft before, like Silence of the Lambs or something like that. Like, check this out. It's interesting. It's not particularly complex. Probably have a lot of your expectations fall flat, but it's an interesting piece. So I don't know. Check it out.
And just as you mentioned, that we've mentioned the acting several times, this is a movie that went through a lot of different changes. At one point, Spielberg was talking to direct the film and wanted De Niro to play Corky. And then Norman Jewison, who is another great director, was originally signed on when the first draft was put out. He wanted Jack Nicholson to star, but Nicholas said he wouldn't do it because he didn't want to wear a hairpiece, which makes me wonder, because it is kind of a weird thing. I
read another thing. They said that was not true. So
okay, who knows?
Who knows?
But Richard Attenborough was a great director for this, and I mean, he just made A Bridge Too Far, which is another excellent film. So Laurence Olivier was going to be in Burgess Meredith's role, which fantastic actor. It would have I cannot imagine him in that role. So I don't think that anybody could have done it other than Burgess Meredith for me in that role. I think it would have changed the dynamic of the role hugely. Jeff.
So the thing I would have liked to see, just one more second. Speaking of, I didn't know we were going to go into all this, but I saw that Gene Wilder had been approached to play Anthony Hopkins' part.
That would have been good.
There was a lot of discussion about having a comedian in that part, and the producers didn't want a comedian because they wanted it to be serious, but not understanding how a comedian would have added additional depth to that whole character dynamic. I would have loved to see that movie.
It's funny. I would have liked to see it too, because I would love to see Gene Wilder. Gene Wilder is fantastic. I wonder if the reasoning is that Gene Wilder, I feel like, has a very hard time not being engaging and charismatic, or at least one or the other. Because I feel like Hopkins did a good job of being very uncharismatic in this film. I didn't particularly find myself attracted to any aspect of him, right? He didn't look good. He didn't present himself well. He was very mousy. But Gene Wilder certainly would have. This could have been the Cable Guy of the '70s, right? Like the terrifying comedy that personally I love. But interesting, good take. I like it. All right, Jeff, who would you recommend this movie to, and why? Or are you going to rewrite it?
All right, I'm going to do both because you knew it was coming.
I did,
and I let other people speak, but I had a lot to say. I'm going to say it now. So here's the thing. So you have this character who's, very anxious, socially, and to the point where it gets to the point he can't even go without his shield for 5 minutes in this uncomfortable moment with his agent, right? So this is like really interesting character to me, and I like that bit of it. But what I think they failed to do was, this really was a psychological drama, like you mentioned in the beginning. I think I've seen it billed a couple times as a psychological horror film, and I think it should have been. And here's why. So you have this kind of like really good ping pong effect. I've mentioned this before, where you go back and forth between two ideas, right? In this case, they like kind of flirted with it a little bit, but never to the point where they tried to make this anything remotely close to a horror film. But you could have really played off this Fats character as like, some supernatural being that's like really taking control of Corky. And they kind of play like they flirt with it when there's the curtain and Fats is in front of the curtain, and it, if you don't notice there's a curtain, you're kind of like, oh well, he's alone and he's moving, so like there's something going on here. He's autonomous now. But this is I think would be the interesting thing that they could have done, is they could have really just get rid of the curtain. The dude's a magician, right? Like, here's the magic that you put into the film. Like he goes into some sort of like elaborate, complex methodology of doing like a magic trick, essentially, of murdering these people with Fats, right? Or not, like, we don't know at the time, right? Mm-hmm. Is Anthony Hopkins' character is nowhere in the scene when these people are murdered, and so we have to keep questioning ourselves. Oh, is this puppet actually like autonomous and like a character, or is it just this second personality of Corky? And you kind of keep going back and forth between those ideas, and then you create the psychological horror. It's like, oh, is he crazy, or is this a murder puppet? And then you end with like, you kind of start to reveal like how he did these magic tricks. He does kind of this elaborate illusion, essentially, to make it seem like Fats is alone and Corky had absolutely nothing to do with the murder, rather than him just standing behind a curtain. Like, right. Maybe he uses pulleys or time things, or just stuff, right?
Always the engineer.
Yeah, he does some sort of magic trick, right? Like some elaborate illusion to do these murders. And then at the end, he comes to like face to face with, it was him all along. You know what I mean? Kind of that literally the exact same dialogue that they actually do use at the end of this film. But I think that would have put this movie just up that extra notch. It would have really kind of kept your mind going throughout kind of the slower bits of the film, and it would have had like a more surprise ending, rather than being just straightforward in the head.
It would have been a different film.
It would have been a different film.
I would like to see that film, but I wonder if like, is there enough in this film to make that this film, or would it just be a brand new, completely different film? But
I don't know. I mean, I think that like, they just didn't put any effort into him obfuscating the fact that he was murdering. That was kind of the thing, right? They could have just put like an extra like 3 or 4 layers in there. For sure. To make it,
because really we know it's him, right? We know very early on that the puppet is not autonomous at all.
That's correct.
And I did like the picture of Anthony Hopkins looming around the corner, like standing stock still at the corner with the knife when you think he's going to go kill Peggy. because he does look like the dummy, right? He's stock still. His eyes are that sort of uncomfortable largeness. Like, that was an interesting moment. I would have liked.
They were dressed the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And they were often dressed the same, which is
Yeah.
They were, which is, again, and they get the same face. But like on that idea of him being like autonomous or like his own character kind of thing, has anyone heard of like the concept of a tulpa? Or it's like people do, I don't even think they really exist, but like some people believe that through meditation style exercises, they can create like a second independent, character like inside their head that has their own thoughts and emotions, but it's not like sort of like an imaginary friend, but not. And I was like, wow, like that really could kind of be like Fats could be his own thing, like his own independent character that was generated through the practicing of these magic trips in this cultural show. It's just like a whole weird like subculture. I'm sure there are like subreddits about it.
I didn't realize that's how
the whole tulpa thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I have heard about that. They actually used it in a Batman comic, which is fascinating. He trains himself to have this primal secondary figure, so when his brain snaps, he still can function as Batman. It's such a brilliant, Bruce Wayne, ridiculous, out there mental gymnastic thing. I loved it.
Obviously, yeah, it wasn't mentioned at all in this movie. Like, it was definitely like played as a mental health issue. Or like suppress part of his own character, but like I'm like, that's out there too as a possible option for interpretation.
And I guess for me too, and we'll get to Greg and what Jeff actually would recommend, who would actually recommend this movie to. But I enjoyed this movie, but I think you're right in that there are so many more concepts to work with this secondary figure, this icon of humanity that is not human, the ventriloquist dummy, that still have yet to be explored, despite the fact that we have a ton of doll and ventriloquist horror films. And I think it's a really interesting tool. And I think there's a reason that so many Aboriginal and early civilizations have used totems and icons and things like that to represent personalities and powers and beings and things, because there's so much there. So I don't think we'll ever stop getting those movies, and I actually really enjoy this one. I think it's probably one of the better ventriloquist dummy movies. However, I completely agree that I would really like to see something different with it. And this one didn't follow anything different. I mean, and if anybody loves this stuff, I think everyone who does knows the Bobcat Goldthwait episode of Tales from the Crypt, which is a fantastic ventriloquist dummy. This doesn't go too far from that, even though it has less supernatural bent. But Greg, actually, Jeff, let's finish you. Who would you recommend this film as is to?
So the movie that I didn't rewrite, the movie that actually was made, I would really just stick to people who love film and performances, which is really just people who are going to see all the Oscar films every year and stuff. I don't know, this probably didn't get an Oscar nomination, but I think it is that type of film that it must have been like kind of like on the list or whatever. Well, it was like
the Joker, right? I mean, I don't think that the plot line of the Joker was actually particularly strong, but Joaquin Phoenix's performance was, it was the highest echelon, or one of them, really. It was quite strong. Yeah. And I agree with you on that front. Greg, who would you recommend this movie to and why?
Well, I'm glad that you've mentioned the Joker several times, and Jeff, you brought up the Supernatural, because honestly, I think anyone that liked the Joker, I would recommend this to them, because I saw this as existing in the same universe in my head canon, and this is a ventriloquist Scarface origin film.
Yes, exactly. I was going to mention that.
Especially because at the end with Ann-Margret, with her character, I loved that bit where she's kind of calling out to him like, oh, like, hey, I'm coming by, like, let's make this work. And she kind of tries her own voice out for Corky.
Yes.
And in my head, I'm, since they ended on kind of that, like, what happens next, I'm like, she goes in there and it snaps her immediately. She's like, oh my God. And her only thought is, well, I can't let Corky be destroyed. So she takes Corky and takes up the mantle of the ventriloquist with Scarface.
Scarface, yes. I 100% was going to mention that, because for Batman fans or people who don't know, of course, Scarface is the mobster wooden ventriloquist dummy who is handled by the mild-mannered, I think he's actually an attorney, like an accountant, the ventriloquist, who's super mild-mannered, but the puppet is violent and crazy and a mobster, and he runs this gang syndicate even though it's so crazy. And they do all these fun tricks with him in the comics where, is he real? Is he not real? Who knows? Absolutely. And this film really, to me, felt like a prototype of the Joker in many ways. I think that I would be honestly really surprised if Todd Phillips, who directed and assisted writing of the Joker, if he did not see this movie before. I
thought as well. It's the Joker is another film that doesn't quite understand mental health, and so
100%. And well, we'll get into this one day with the Joker. Yeah. I think the Joker didn't actually, and I'm a fan. Batman is my jam, and all the Batman universe, and I enjoyed the film, and I was waiting for it, and I really did enjoy it, and the performances were super strong. But as an actual narrative and as a script, it did not work cohesively to reach any sort of clear conclusion. I mean, Todd Phillips arguing that no, it's very clear what happened, and essentially if you didn't get it, you weren't paying attention. I'm like, no, you can't just tell us that certain things didn't happen and he was imagining it. If there's no clues, then sorry, not the way it's gonna be.
I mean Todd Phillips' real answer was, you get what you fucking deserve. So
exactly, which is totally his thing. I believe he literally in an interview was like, I just am really excited to fuck with fan people of the Joker. And I'm like, interesting, because I'm pretty sure you just fucked with all of us when you made Due Date. So, all right.
Back to the topic.
What movie?
And just as a note, this movie, Anthony Hopkins, he did a little TV movie after this, but then the second year he did The Elephant Man, David Lynch's version. And we of course talked about The Elephant Man a little bit when we talked about Partners, because of John Hurt playing the Elephant Man. So, I mean, this was really, I think, the start. I would argue it's the start of Anthony Hopkins' superstardom, even though the film is not particularly well remembered in most circles.
It's really good. It was a lot of fun to watch.
People who watch film would have seen this in 1978, and
right.
They would have been, looking for him to be in stuff after
Agreed.
this. I think there's no way that this performance didn't.
And he's nearly. Something. I mean, he's the focus in just about every scene. He's not a main character who's not there a lot. There's only a less than 5, I would think, scenes where he's not the fixture. Okay, and that comes to me. Who would I recommend this movie for? I think you are all absolutely correct. The solid performances, a psychological drama. I think that the one strongest argument that can be made about the in sort of defense of the film about mental illness is that I think we do feel for Corky, even if we don't necessarily like him. But sure, it's absolutely just like the Joker. It's a shorthand of mental illness as a trigger for psychosis and violent outbreaks. I mean, there's no way around that. I do think it's a little cathartic that way, but then through the film, by the end, it's no longer cathartic because we've seen the horrible, recompense that he's reaped right through these actions. But yeah, I really liked it. And as a ventriloquist lover and like a dummy and a puppet person, watch it. Fats is he's now one of my absolute top ventriloquist dummies in film and media, because he was strong. He looked crazy good. And it just breaks my heart to think that his versions are locked in a trunk somewhere in some prop house or in some producer's back lot. Like that breaks my heart. And if anybody knows the location of any Fatses, please let me know, and I will certainly rescue them and give them a good home.
They're all at Anthony Hopkins' house. He just writes operas for them all day.
He just has them sitting along every time, and he just practices. He's like, so what'd you think about Transformers? I didn't see it. You didn't see it. Nobody else did either. Yeah. Okay.
Fats in a lake full of dead bodies.
Oh, so many dead bodies. Yeah, he did not weigh them down very well at all. I will give him that. They kept coming back up. All right. So we're going to move on to the next film. The next film that we have is, as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, a real rarity. It's called It Came from Uranus. It is from 2012. There is another film from, I believe, 2007 called It Came from Uranus. It's another low-budget affair that is not this film. You would know the difference because this one is 100% starring puppets. It is sort of like a Muppets homage. It's not as vile as Peter Jackson's Meet the Feebles, which is a lot of fun. It's more like a kitschy homage to 50 science fiction movies with lots of puns, third wall breaking, and like I said, puppets. It's a Canadian film, so it's overall fairly nice, but we'll talk about it. This film, track it down if you can, search the forums. I'm trying to find a solid source where people can get it, but I think it's worth seeing as a cult film, and we're going to discuss why. I'm going to summarize it this way. A couple of aliens from Uranus, but it's always pronounced Uranus in this film, are coming to Earth ostensibly to harvest methane gas from our farts because they need it and they're running out and their planet will die without it. So they're going to unleash a special gas a space gas into our water supply, which will make us fart. Things go wrong. Instead, it makes belly button lint that becomes sentient and tries to collect into a giant mass to then terrify the human race into being enslaved, at which point one of the Uranus aliens can then use his new methane and slave army to take over Uranus. So we have a group, a handful, half dozen people or puppets who are sort of wise to the plans of the aliens, and they go through like a shocking amount of 50s sci-fi shtick plot twists in order to get to the ending and save the Earth from the Uranus aliens. There's a lot in this movie, and it's a real strange beast. They tried to Kickstarter it, they tried to Indiegogo it for $500. Clearly, they were already going to finish the movie and just wanted a little extra bump. They only got, I think, $75 from 2 donors, so it wasn't hugely successful that way. I believe it aired at several film festivals, including probably the Hamilton Film Festival in Canada. I think they probably got pretty good reviews, but again, Poor Fishy Films was the production company that only made a couple of shorts and this movie, and they are no longer present. So I found this at a thrift store, and I couldn't be happier. Greg, first, what was your expectation going into It Came from Uranus?
I mean, I honestly, I didn't expect to laugh. It was pretty low. I was like, I'm sure I'll get a chuckle, but some of the jokes, I was like, that's a really good fucking joke. Like, yeah. That's solid. I'm like you said, I mean, so much of it was puns and there was some sophomoric humor. But like all the names that Rocco calls his girlfriend, like Alice. I think I wrote down Crater Crotch.
Crater Crotch was the one that stuck out. Yeah.
Yeah, there was some good bits, and I mean, it had a plethora of comedy for different folks.
And full disclosure, Greg and I wrote a musical that has yet to be produced, and the music has yet to be written. Sort of with the idea that it was like Dog Sees God, sort of a Charlie Brown take that is officially not Charlie Brown, but it would be Charlie Brown. And in this case, it's officially not the Mario Brothers, but it is based loosely on an idea somewhat similar to the Mario Brothers.
I think it was inspired by the Super Mario Brothers Super Show mostly.
Yeah, I think, and so when I was watching this movie, I was thinking about that script because it's very much the same. It's ridiculous. It doesn't take itself seriously, but it also doesn't take the audience seriously.
No.
At all. And I didn't know what to take because the poster says thrills, chills, fart jokes. And that's not wrong. Jeff, what was your thought state when you went in to see this film?
I didn't have like a DVD with like this cover on it. So like, I thought it was kind of like a serious production. Like, like this was just something that I had never heard of.
You thought It Came from Uranus was a serious production?
I don't know. There's some weird named films out there. I don't know. I didn't mean like serious, I mean, like, not like, black and white hand puppets made by, some dude in blank city
Canada.
in Canada. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I was just like, at first I was like, oh, this like first scene is like, oh, this is like this is what this is gonna be. And so, you know, my expectations started like in the middle, and then they went right down to the floor, but then they came back up again. As I was like, oh, okay, there's some intelligence behind the writing. It's not just fart jokes.
It really had. It's really weird because I really did eventually completely get into the groove of the movie. And I wasn't at first, even though I love puppets. So really, they could have done anything. It could have been a silent puppet movie where I had to read puppet lips, which is impossible. And I would have probably been down. I'd have been like, that's a $2.99 well spent.
Yeah, I heard a challenge there, so I need to.
Okay.
It's like sign language, but through the puppet, you have to do it at like the right frequency.
It's all right. That's some physical humor that does not play on podcasts. Mandy, what was your expectation going into this movie?
My expectation was an hour and a half of fart jokes, poop jokes, all the kind of butt jokes. That expectation was met. I was very happy. Potty humor is my favorite. So, I mean, as many movies as you want to watch on this theme, I'm there.
I was happy too because it's like, okay, where is it going to fall on the crassness scale? Is it going to be like fart and duty jokes like Sarah Silverman, where it's very childish, but also can be edgy, but childish? Or is it going to be like, you know, Crank Yakers, late night, you know, animation where it's borderline vile piles of vomit being sucked up through your bum hole and become poop, you know, like that sort of level of heinous. And it really is more the Sarah Silverman and probably even a little lighter. Like it's something like, it's like the one fart joke that DreamWorks will put into their animated movies, but spread through an entire feature. And it was charming. And also, as someone who doesn't usually like fart jokes, they really do kind of throw a dozen puns at you a minute, and 8 of them can just hit the ground, but as long as 4 land, I'm happy, right? It's sort of the intelligence of wise comedy, you know, like Joan Rivers would throw 1 million at you. A few only had to stick to entertain you. So everything about this movie sort of surprised me in quality, except the voice acting. I mean, these are not professional voice actors. They are sort of one-time people. The person who
one of them drove me fucking nuts.
Oh yeah, was it the girlfriend?
Alice,
yes.
the girlfriend.
Yeah. Why was she talking like that?
Yeah, holy
That
shit.
was really horrible.
I'm sorry, is it Wanda? I can't remember. I think it's Wanda. Yeah.
I thought Wanda was the...
Yeah, Wanda's the barmaid or the diner lady.
Alice.
Wait, I feel like at some points they mixed up names or said stuff weird, and I was like,
yeah.
Who are we talking about?
Yeah, so I don't really know. So weirdly enough, this is a very strange thing. The character of Alice is not actually credited on IMDb, which is a little odd.
Yeah.
Because everyone else is credited on IMDb in this film. So I don't know who. I'd have to look again at the actual credits in the film. So I don't know what kind of bad blood went on there. Maybe that was the true nail in the coffin of poor fishy films. But let's just listen here to this clip of the opening with the 2 aliens from Uranus in their spaceship looking down over Earth. Here we go.
On your command, your odiousness.
Go ahead. You may release the space gas from Uranus. Silent but deadly.
Pardon, sir?
Oh, nothing. And now we wait for humanity to fall at my feet.
What?
Yeah, so that is sort of the level of voice acting that one would expect in a YouTube debut sort of amateur video. And you get it through the whole movie. And the key problem is the pacing of it. right? It's, you know, it's not professional voice acting because they're sort of reading a script as they go. There are some who are better at it. The writer and main producer of the film, who plays the lead, Rocco, is I guess this is not the leader. My bad. Alan Jeffries plays Rocco, and he does a good job. His accent is ridiculous, but again, we're talking about puppets in the imaginary 50s in a small Canadian town called Ed Woodville in Saskatchewan. So, I mean, I don't think it ruins the film by any stretch, but the pacing of the speech is sort of like me stuttering right now. It took a very concerted effort for me to sort of fall in rhythm with it, so it didn't bother me so much. And absolutely, Alice, the girlfriend's voice, who is a main character and present for the entire film, is skin-numbingly, like gum-bleedingly bad. Like, I don't know what bodily ailment appropriately matches it, but she talks so slow the whole time. Bless her, it was not the best. And she also lost her accent a little bit, and I'm like, did somebody else dub that line, or did she just forget how she spoke? That said, there were some great jokes in there. I also, listening to it, it's a little, you don't get the full effect of seeing puppets say this. Like the Uranus puppets look like something from the earliest episodes of Sesame Street on a budget. Like they're not bad, but they have little fur manes and a little fur capped eyeball stalk that just bounces to the side on the top of their head. And I wasn't sure what to expect, because everything looked good, right? But it just didn't. The first 4 or 5 minutes maybe are on a spaceship overlooking Earth, and I get nothing else. It wasn't until after that initial scene where we actually get to the planet, we get the heavy banter with lots of puns, and we actually get to see some radically different looking puppets, that it really kicked off for me. So I could see where, if this had been released direct to video, wide scale, you might have had a lot of haters who were like, I can't even watch this, like, right off the bat. I don't know if anybody else was that way at first before falling into it. I think, Jeff, you said that you kind of felt that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad. I mean, it's real bad. It's like, I even did this thing where like, like, don't do this if you make a film. Like they'd like have music in a scene, and then they would fade it out, and then they'd have like the screen fade. You got to like blend your scenes together. It was like watching like a skit, and then there's like another skit that happened after it. It's like so jarring. It's like, just don't do that. It's just like, so it's like, it was like real but like the scenes lasted so long that like, or they were almost like a series of skits at this point.
Yeah, they don't change. Yeah. They don't change sets a lot. And actually sort of, it made me wonder, because I guess the people who made it are veterans of local film festivals, and I would hazard to say performance festivals, because it seemed to me like this could very easily be turned into a stage show, right? Because you stay in one set for a very long scene. Like maybe there's only 6 or 7 different places, like scenes, like and you don't go back and forth that much. Mm-hmm. You go to the diner a couple of times. But other than that, you really, when you get to a new location, you stay in that location. There was also a point where I didn't even realize that they changed locations. They go to Rocco's apartment. There's like, bottles in the background and things, and it's just kind of a dump. And I didn't even realize that they'd gone to his apartment until later when they said it. Looking back, it makes total sense. Well, I wouldn't go that far, but looking back, it fits. But thinking back, like when we've reviewed fan films, like The Legend of Zelda fan film, The Hero of Time, where those were huge continuity errors that made it difficult for me to understand what was happening. This didn't have that. The only time there was something that was really confusing was when Alice's character thinks she's pregnant somehow, and it turns out that she's drinking the tainted water, which makes her belly button lint become a monster. So we think. It doesn't really come to fruition, but she gets a rash on her belly, and they see the doctor who tells her she's pregnant later, he dies in the middle of the diner and is like, that's the same rash as I have. And you're like, wait, you have a rash? You've never mentioned a rash before in the entire film. So they cover it. They sort of do this backtrack and you're like, oh, okay, but that's a weird way to tell a story. It's sort of like you would do that in person if you're telling a joke and ruining it. You know what I mean?
Well, how about the fact that the doctor who improperly diagnosed her pregnancy wasn't able to figure out that her sex was actually male.
Yes, she's a biological male.
Which I up until probably that point, or when they finally revealed who the secret alien was, like that right there, which I think that's like 3/4 of the way into the movie, that's when it all fell apart for me. Up until then, I was having fun.
You're following the plot?
Yeah, I was following it close enough to like.
I was just going from fart joke to fart joke. That's all I was doing.
I was just like, give me my next fart joke. Give it to me.
But but like
I was thinking this should be a drinking game. Like this is just meant for it. It's like if you want to get like buzzed,
that'd be a good one.
Like every time somebody farts, you drink. If you want to get like drunk, you say every time somebody says it came from Uranus or space gas from Uranus, you drink. If you want to get blackout, you just any butt related joke or anything comes out, you'll get blackout from that.
I think you would need to just to start the movie off right. Finish your drink as soon as I wrote down this line: overpower your anus with an iron fist. Like not even 5 minutes in, and I'm as soon as that was the joke that pulled me into the film. I was like, you know what? Okay, like I'm here.
I'm living for it.
Yeah.
Here, the thing. So, okay, there are a couple of moments that I absolutely love in this film. I think part of the thing that where you were saying, Greg, you were probably like you got lost, or it lost you. The effect lost you.
It just got too much.
Well, and that's because they have like they get through sort of when you do a satire or really if you do just a straight up a ripoff, I guess, but a satire of something, there's two ways to do it, right? You have it where the whole overarching theme or like relative plot is similar or pays homage to this other thing, or you have it where like you follow things beat for beat. And this film like does both. Like it does the overarching thing for the first 2/3 of the movie, maybe even 3/4. But then that last little bit is crammed with like all of these 50s shticky plot twists. Like we get like we have the long scene, which is an homage to The Thing, both the original and the remake, where like one of them is the alien, right? They don't do a blood test in this one, but they check everyone's belly button because a clean belly button clearly could not be an alien somehow. I don't really understand that logic, but that's okay. But that's very clear. But then we get hit with, there's on the radio, we get this little foreshadowing of the is it Brown Bag Bandit? Someone who which by the way has one of my favorite puns in the whole show. One of the guys then turns out to be an undercover private investigator. That's 50s twist number 2.
I love that bit.
He's looking for a random criminal who just so happens to be in the area. That's plot point number 3 of the 50s movies. The criminal is the brown bag rustler who runs into supermarkets, takes the brown bags, shoves them down their pants, and runs away. And they ask the question, what crime is that? Rustling. And I was like, that is my favorite pun in the whole thing. It's so stupid and it's brilliant. And for someone who loves like the ridiculous skits of like drag queen legends and things like that, like those moments just made me so happy. And that's what 3 50s homages, plus they keep that one of them's the alien, and also it ends in a cave. That is 50s requirement for a science fiction movie, always ends in a cave. And then the 5th one is that the Brown Bag Bandit is actually the girlfriend that we knew from the beginning, who is also the long lost brother of the private investigator, unbeknownst to him. So that's like, depending on how you count it, 4 to 6 like ridiculously common 50 shticks that they cram in, and they do not come into play. They maybe foreshadow a couple of them, but they don't come into play until that last 3rd or 4th of the movie, and it's too fast. they have some funny jokes, but I feel like it actually is too much to take in at once. And that's where I was like, wait, what are we doing again? Why are we in a cave? Like, I do need to know a little bit of why we're there. And I think that's probably what you're talking about, where you're like, meh, the whole concept sort of fell apart for me.
Yeah, I think maybe the problem is that 3/4 of the way through they decided to have a plot.
Yeah.
And it was far too late. We'd had too many puns, too many fart jokes. I wasn't here to figure out whose twin brother shoved a bag down their pants and was actually a man the whole time, and I didn't give a shit.
I will say that when that reveal came, I was both intrigued but also terrified that they would be really unkind to trans people, as often happens.
Yeah.
But I have to say they actually weren't. I didn't feel like she actually has this line that's like at the end, like, what did everybody learn? It's like, I learned that what you are on the inside, that it doesn't matter what you are on the outside. What you are on the inside is important. And you're like, okay, that's actually a very a sort of a trans recognition, right? Like, I am a woman inside, so it doesn't matter if I have a penis, right? I identify as a woman. And then you get the sort of jerky main character guy, her girlfriend is like, I guess I found out I'm into dudes. Little maybe insensitive, but he stays with her. He's like, yeah, we're getting married. Still you, even though you now have a more masculine voice now that you've done this reveal, which, by the way, the masculine voice was much more tolerable than the female impersonation voice. So I was actually kind of surprised. I'm like, I feel like this is actually a relatively pro-gender identity ending, because they didn't make fun of it. It was a plot point that was goofy in and of itself, and I guess in that sense you could say it was sort of making fun of it, but I didn't feel like they trivialized it any more than they trivialized, I don't know, marriage, plot coherence, gestational distress. Yeah, I don't know that any of that was really shockingly.
Well, there it is,
offensive.
2012, the year that trans rights were finally solved.
Well, it made it happen. I was like, this happened in 2012, and it's actually based off of the filmmaker's original live action movie, which isn't listed on IMDb. This is the thing. IMDb is a very large, the Internet Movie Database. All film lovers know this website. It is the first place to go, but there are so many small films, fan films, personal films that just never make it on there. And we lose those to time. And it actually is so sad to me, because there is a film version of this starring live action people that I can't see because it's not listed anywhere, except in some minor notes in weird, obscure online web archives. So interesting to know. But yeah, 2012, I was like, man, Canada is so much nicer than the US. Like, in 2012, that's 8 years ago. Everyone was still laughing at the end of Ace Ventura. Okay, like, that is how untrans friendly we were, and kind of are. It's still a huge issue. So I thought that was a nice and surprising thing, and just reminded us of how Canada, unless you're Aboriginal, Canada's not so good with them, but neither are we. So, okay, back to the point. This film, lots of jokes, lots of fart jokes, tons of the third wall breaking actually came in so early in the movie that I think that's, Greg, when I decided that, this can't have a solid plot because they're not going to pay attention to it, so I'm not going to pay attention. And then when plot reveals came, I'm like, wait, what? Where's the pun? I need the puns. Mandy, I know you enjoyed this film, which makes me happy. Did you have like a favorite moment?
Oh my gosh. I really, really enjoyed the Martian, or the aliens, not the Martians, the aliens, and the fact that their names sounded like farts.
Yeah,
and
the
like
hero
really
is
like any of the yeah,
that's
exactly.
his name.
Yeah, his name is. So any of their interactions together, I really enjoyed that.
The evil alien is Galaxis. Galaxis. It's very hard to say. It's Galaxis, but with ass in it. Okay.
Yeah. Galaxis. Yeah.
I'm developing a speech impediment just trying to say the name properly.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think those are my favorite parts. Just like the alien puppets were really pretty hilarious, and cute looking. Like the human parts, like I also was annoyed by Alice's voice and the way that was done. I really liked the scientist that was actually a janitor that was going to go to scientist school.
Yes,
I thought
he
that
hadn't taken the
was
scientist test yet.
right. You know, as an engineer, I like really enjoyed that. I thought that was really like a cute part of it. And it like overall, it just kind of felt like something that I might stumble on like on YouTube, as kind of was mentioned.
I was really
And
hoping this film would be on YouTube, but the trailer is, but the film is apparently not.
Yeah, and it was just like fun and campy and like low stress. And
yes,
it was really good in that way for, you know, what it was.
I also really enjoyed, there are so many background gags in the sets they put together for this, because these are full sets. Like, I was sort of unsure what to expect, because I was thinking, well, you could do still frame sets and a green screen the whole thing, like you just have, you know, drawn images, which could have been cool, but they actually built sets. And there's like, and I guess a lot of these are from Poor Fishy Films' previous shorts, but there's funny things, like there's in the doctor's office in the background, which is under a bowling alley, so you constantly hear bowling sounds. There's a cereal box for tobaccos. There's like beer bottles from yard sales. There's the doctor's office has a eye chart that says, "My nurse steals money from my," and then I couldn't read it.
Yeah.
Like, and there's a tip jar with change in it in the doctor's office. And the cotton ball jar says puffy white things. Like, they put a lot of effort into these background pieces, and the diner has them too. It's just, and also they sort of revel in their Canadian identity. So there's like Nova Scotia license plates on the table, and like all of these little bits of Canadian things that sort of crab me up. One of the one who's a private eye is undercover as a ridiculously super stereotypical French lumberjack, like a Montreal lumberjack. And it's and what about, so the film ends and they realize that, like at the very end, that everything's great. Oh wait, the scientist, or the to-be scientist, was beamed to Uranus, and like, we got to go rescue him. And then it gives you like, and so then they go off, and then it gives you like this still frame, like follow-up for every character. Like, he was rescued and he became a great inventor and blah, 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 blah. And then it's like, we wish you could tell you all that. And then the next one is like, everyone died in a car accident on the way out of the building, except for Billy, the kid who was an orphan who grew up to be like, that was, I actually thought that was fantastic, but I was actually like, that's a little sad. And I was like, I didn't think I was that invested in this ridiculous puppet movie to find this. But I really liked
They were testing you. Yeah, I also really, really enjoyed that. And like, no one had mentioned this orphan Billy before through any of this discussion. And
God, fuck Billy.
He's what bothered me the most about this whole movie. Like, I just wasn't bothered by much, but like the crying in the background that went on for like.
So basically, you were excited when he got shot.
We were all excited when he got shot.
Yeah.
I on this, you gave us these nice sheets to write down, you know, strengths and weaknesses of the films. I immediately, as soon as I heard that, I started writing under weaknesses, this kid's nonstop fucking crying. And then as soon as he got shot, I just drew an arrow up to strengths and wrote that kid getting shot. Like,
well, it's kind of brilliant, right? Because it's like, this is one of the great things that you do in film, is you make the audience feel something, and then you make them, like, I guess in this case, like, feel okay with the horrible thing that happens next or whatever. In this case, we all get really annoyed just by the noise of this kid crying, and we're all like, yay, he just got murdered.
Which is
I
like,
don't have to
it's
hear
like,
it anymore.
It's like 10 minutes.
Oh, it's literally like a 10-minute scene, and
long time.
Every time some new reveal or accusation happens, because it's during that Thing style scene, like, then the kid screams again, and the crying never stops. And I'm like, this is the longest. I so respect them for that, because it's that whole concept of taking a joke so far that the audience hates it to the point where then we start to like it for a split second, and then we hate it even more.
I think it's just a theater of cruelty, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Well, it's like, okay, so the one of my favorite podcasts that I suggest everyone listen to is Nobody Listens to Paula Poundstone. Paula Poundstone and Adam Felber have this podcast, and they, for 2 years now, or over 100 episodes, have kept some of these ongoing jokes going since the very beginning that hit every single podcast, to the point where sometimes they will read letters from people writing in. We're like, I just don't think this is funny anymore. And they're like, well, you don't have to listen. And I'm like, it makes me so happy, because as someone who likes to make things, as so many of us do, it's like that picture of George R.R. Martin flipping off the interviewer who asked him what he has to say to kids who say, finish the books because you're going to die soon. And he just flips them off. Like, it's just such, it's like, actually, I don't do this for you. I do it for me. And they go so far to actually anger. I mean, my wife and I were watching this, and she was doing something else. And I was like, is that kid still fucking crying? And yes. And then when the scientist then pulls out a gun and is like, I can stop the alien, and he just shoots the kid, like the entire gun. He just unloads it.
That bit was really good. Like,
that was a big clip.
Yeah.
It was a revolver, and it had like 50 bullets in it somehow.
And actually, that is number, depending on how you count, number 5 or 7 of the 50s cliches there afterward. When he unloads the gun, he's like, what do I do now? And he's like, throw it at the alien. And he's like, that won't do anything. It's like, sometimes it does. And he throws it, and it hits the alien, and nothing happens. And the other guy goes, it's like invincible. It's indestructible. It's like,
I did, to follow up with that, Nathan, your bit about like comedy that kind of skirts that line of it's annoying but it's funny, but it's annoying but it's funny. I like to refer to that as the Borderlands style of humor for anyone that's played those games, where they go, aren't fetch quests fucking annoying? Here's a fetch quest. Isn't that funny? And there's literally a joke in this where someone's like, oh, like another tired ass, like 50s reference cliche. Isn't that hilarious? And I'm like, I guess it's funny if you know how not funny it is. And I guess I was just curious what you all thought about those jokes where they're like, this joke isn't funny. Isn't that funny?
It's like so self-aware that you're like, you almost get angry at them.
Yeah.
But then you're like, but I respect you, but I hate you, but I respect you, but I hate you. Stop it.
Okay, apologies to any listeners who hear a weird like beeping or ringing in the background. I'd like to give a shout out to Dell, who designs computers to have faulty fans, and the warning for the fan going out is a horrendous 5-minute cavalcade of the most atonal, non-harmonic. It's worse than my fire alarm. I literally thought the building was coming down the first time it happened. So thank you, Dell.
Why don't we just pitch
Dell? He's lying. He was just recreating the scene from the film where the computer made a really annoying sound. He paused the recording, and then he went and shot it with a machine gun for like 5 minutes.
I was going to say, Dell could just use the audio of Billy crying and just put that in.
And let's talk. We're going to talk. There's still some things to talk about. Billy, when they're in the cave, actually comes back as an adult with acne and bald. Okay, which pretty accurate to most people that I think would be capable of developing time machines to take them back. He turns out he said, no, I didn't die. I just fainted. Love that. Love no explanation. Like, it made me so many moments of this movie, that plus the credits at the like still shot images with the follow-ups after the last scene, reminded me weirdly enough of the Val Kilmer, Robert Downey Jr. vehicle, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, by the guy who wrote Lethal Weapon, where at the end, it's like Robert Downey Jr. is like, but actually he was shot, but he was alive and everything was fine. And he's going to be okay. And the doctor says it's going to be great. And he's like, I know that sounds like a cop-out. Why don't we just bring everybody back? That guy's back. That guy's back. And they all walk in the room. And he's like, but I'm not, because that didn't happen. Only he's okay. And then everybody walks back out. Like, it's just that weird fourth wall breaking, but also like, it's sort of like, hey, you want to see something funny? and then they take the plot and they just break it in half. and I love it. And it was great. And then he tells them, just remember, I got to warn you, take the long road. And then after everything's set, then it just shows him again, like, oh no, I meant don't take the long road. And then that's how they all die in the post-credit scene. Or I mean, the post, ending scene. So Billy is like this annoying character. And then he seems like, oh, he's had a great life. He's an inventor and he's like all this great stuff. And then they're like, just kidding. He's still a piece of shit that you don't like.
Yeah.
And Jeff, you mentioned when we were off recording, because that's when you tell me your best ideas, that just kidding, that the credits were some of the funniest things.
Yes. Yeah. So like one of the jokes is at the end is, if anyone in this film resembles anybody in real life, it's purely coincidence, especially since they're puppets, and puppets are different than people. It's just like my type of humor there. And they go on to like spoil like Star Wars and stuff. And
yeah,
like, if you don't,
because it's supposed to be in the 50s, and they're like, what? Yeah, it's his dad. When Joy Empire,
they tell you to go to the library because it's the 50s and like the internet doesn't exist yet. It's good.
And there's an opening credits too that's very 50s, because there's not that many people that worked on this movie, yet the credits both at the end and in the opening are very long. And the credits roll after the aliens from Uranus are shown sort of like releasing the gas onto the planet. And they're perfect 50s style, like original Roger Corman and pre-Roger Corman productions, just rows of names. And they're virtually all completely fake and jokes, including sound effects by, Ian Turnett, and things like that. And then it's like knock, knock. And then the next line is like, who's there? And then it's like banana. And then it does banana like fucking 4 or 5 times. And then after the credits finish, then one more pops up that says, aren't you glad I didn't say banana again?
Very Holy Grail, Monty Python.
Spaceballs. Yeah, I was getting the whole gamut on that. And I guess even when I thought a joke might not be that great, I totally respected how many. I mean, you don't, as a comedian, everybody works differently, of course, but most people, when we write jokes, we don't, in order to get that much material in a scene, you have to rewrite and add and add and add. And that's why so many films have punch-up writers who are often not credited. Like Patton Oswalt has done this a bunch. I did this, where you go in and you take a script that's done and they're like, we need some witty banter. And you throw that in. Or we have side characters off here and they need to have funny lines. Sometimes those are like ad-lib lines, but oftentimes they're not. And you see those all the time in films like Anchorman, when they use the insane cologne and someone runs by going like, it smells like Bigfoot's dick. Like that might have been ad-libbed, but also that's what a punch-up writer would do, right? They'd write those jokes. And that's why they bring them in, because a fresh set of eyes can put in a whole new layer of jokes. And this script had many, many, many jokes. Too many to count. Like, I guarantee you can watch, it's like riff tracks from Mystery Science Theater. I could watch this again and hear things that I did not remember or did not recognize at all. And that, I totally give him props for that. The other thing that I thought was interesting is, did anybody else notice the insane breasts they put on Wanda, the diner lady? Like, she's supposed to be like, they give this moment where it's hard to see because they only have them in a couple of scenes where they have it low enough. They gave her visible bra straps, and then she has literal like felt covered cups that are like on her chest, and it is very funny but also super confusing, to the point where I didn't get it that those were breasts until the scene where she comes into the laboratory on the edge of town, and the scientist wannabe like ogles her, and you think they're going to have a romantic moment. They actually gave her these. So they don't show it a couple times yet. It just showed me, I'm like, one, giving a Muppet breasts essentially is difficult, apparently. And two, there's a lot of detail that went into each puppet that we don't actually see, because I feel like I don't think the cinematography totally gave us time. Like, we never see most of the puppets full on, yet most of the puppets have legs, including like the doctor when he dies on the floor in the diner. By the way, I love how they didn't remove his arm handle, the stick that he's moved with.
Yeah,
it just left it too, and I'm like, I don't know if that was an intentional joke, but it did make me laugh. So we're gonna get to the end here. I do certainly hope that everyone does their best to find this film. At least go watch the trailer for It Came from Uranus 2012 on YouTube, and try and find these folks, because I think this is a worthy film to watch. It was written by Ken Turner and directed by Paul J. Bresky. So we're gonna go reverse here. Greg, who would you recommend this film to, and why?
Honestly, I'm gonna do what I did in the previous time, where movies I'd rather be watching, which was basically everything that I was picking apart from this, of like, I saw bits of the actual Muppets movie in here.
Mm-hmm.
I saw bits of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I saw bits of Spaceballs, especially at the beginning when they're monologuing about like what they're gonna do to the planet, and all I can hear is like, and thus destroy planet Duridia and save Spaceballs. Everyone got that? Like, very reminiscent. That said, if you like that kind of irreverent humor, I mean, I'd say at least give this a watch. It was funny. It had some bits that fell apart, but it hit so many types of comedy, good or bad, that I think at least you'd find something that makes you laugh.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. Jeff?
Here's what you're going to do, people. If you have an anus, go to your local Goodwill. If you can find this, get it and make all of your friends watch it. And then you'll have something to talk about. And it'll be a good time. And yeah, do it.
And I'm gonna put it out there. If anybody knows the individuals who made this film, let me know. I would love to find a way to get this film released through somewhere. I got connections, people. I got connections. If anybody doesn't remember, I already kickstarted several sequel features thanks to this podcast that I don't have the time to remember what they were. Mandy, who would you recommend this film to, and why?
Well, since everybody poops, I think everyone should see this movie.
Okay, I'm just going to say this. Jeff and Mandy are brother and sister, as we've mentioned before. And I knew that Jeff at least would enjoy this film. I didn't know Mandy's relationship with fecal matter and feces. But
we're the same person, by the way.
I did know that. I knew Jeff's because in high school, when we would go do things, oftentimes Jeff would be in a crotchety mood in the morning when we went to do something. And he'd be like, well, I didn't get to BM. I'm like, okay. I don't know. That seems like something that could be remedied where we're going, but apparently that was integral. And I think many of us probably feel the same way. But what we don't generally do is say, oh, I feel so good today. I had a great BM. I'm like, this is something that an 85-year-old man might say.
I started young. Every time at dinner when I was younger, it would be, as soon as our family dinner was done, I'd be like, oh, time for my after dinner crap. And I'd head on off.
That's because your favorite meal was X-Lax and milk. I'm just kidding. Okay.
You can't drink milk, asshole. Trying to make fun of me.
I can't. I'm lactose intolerant. All right. Who would I recommend this film to? First off, anyone who loves puppets, weird kitsch. If you've seen Peter Jackson's insanely perverse take on the Muppets Meet the Feebles, maybe we will do that on the show at some point because it is fantastic. But if you like that kind of thing, watch this movie. Not as edgy as that one, but certainly worth a view. Really, find this movie and find the people who made this movie and get them in contact with me, because I will give their creation the respect it deserves by releasing it to all of the crazy, sleazy people that we know and love listen to our podcast. So thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of Cult and Classes. Thank you to all the panelists. As always, the Chud is going to play us out. You can visit us online at cultandclassicpodcast.com, Facebook, Instagram. You can visit the Chud at facebook.com/thechudband. And please leave reviews on anywhere that you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Pod Addict, any of those things. Leave a review. Let us know. Screenshot it. Send it to us. We'll send you a little gift. And enjoy your day. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening to Cult and Classic Podcast. This podcast is important to me, but what's more important are the rights, privileges, and freedom from violence of everyone in this country and in this world. And that means supporting Black Lives Matter. If you'd like to make a donation, please go ahead and visit cultandclassicpodcast.com, where we have a list of places you can donate and help out. And please stay safe.